Hi guys, and welcome to my very first beginner's tutorial for digital art. Today we're going to be working in Photoshop, and this tutorial is going to be geared towards people who've maybe just gotten a tablet and they're not really sure where to start. So we're going to start from the very beginning. I'm sure you're all really anxious to get started, so let's just go ahead and jump right in. The first thing you're going to want to do when you open Photoshop is create a canvas. To create a canvas, you're going to come up here to File. You're going to say New. And here it's going to ask you some questions about your canvas. You're going to choose the size of the canvas, and you can choose that in either pixels, inches, centimeters, so on. I usually stay with pixels and inches. Today we're going to use a canvas that's 1500 by 1500 pixels. I feel like that's pretty adequate for what we're doing. And the next thing it's going to ask you is your resolution. And if you're wanting it to have pretty decent quality, I would always use 300. 300 is about where I keep it for all of my art. And it's pretty standard. You'll sometimes hear people refer to this as DPI. So if you're wondering what people are talking about when they say 300 DPI or anything involving DPI, that's what they're talking about. You want to make sure that your color mode for this is an RGB color. And the background today is going to be white. You'll say OK, and that'll bring you up to this screen where you'll see your canvas. So now that we have a canvas, we're going to need to start sketching. I'm going to close out of this canvas since I already have my canvas up, and we're going to try to sketch this guy that I sketched earlier. I thought he was pretty cute, so I figured, why not? Let's go for it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pick your brush. And today we're going to be doing the basic of the basic brush. We're going to use one brush from start to finish, nothing fancy, so you don't need any extra add-ons, just what you have. You'll find your brushes up here. We're going to click this drop-down menu and pick this basic hard round brush. Everybody should have one of these. Then close this, and we're going to go to the settings. Your brush settings are located over here. You're going to click on this. Choose Shape Dynamics. This is what's going to change the width of your strokes as you color and as you draw. You'll want to go over to Control, drop down this, and make sure that pin pressure is on. Sometimes it'll be off. See what happens to the line when you turn it off. When you turn it back on, it changes the thickness of the line depending on the pressure that you're putting on your tablet, and that gives you more control over your art. So we'll want to make sure that pin pressure is on. Now this is optional, but for me, when I'm sketching, I like to come down here to transfer and make sure that it's checked on, make sure that pin pressure is on, and this will change the, as you can see here, the lightness and the darkness, the presence really of your line. When I turn it off, you can see that this line is solid. When I turn it on, the darkness of the line responds to how much pressure I'm putting on my tablet. So we're going to turn it on. I make sure that it's all the way down to minimum. That's just how I like to do it for sketching. You don't have to do it that way at all. Now the first thing you're going to want to do when you start a sketch is create a layer. And I cannot tell you how many people come to me embarrassed that they don't know how to create a layer, and it's totally okay. It's kind of hard to find. You have to come down here. You see where my mouse is circling? This is where you're going to be looking at your layers. And down here in the bottom right, it looks like a page with an upturned corner, and that's what you're going to click to create your very first layer. Okay? So now that we have our layer, we have our brush ready to go, we need to pick a color. I like to stay with kind of a dark gray when I'm sketching, but sometimes I sketch in bright colors like pink and blue, and you can do whatever you want to. So we're going to start sketching this little guy. And I tried to pick something that stayed with kind of rounder shapes. I feel like round shapes are pretty forgiving. Oh, one last thing. When you start sketching, you might want to change your flow. I'll explain what this flow does later, so don't get really intimidated because I'm throwing new words at you. But I like to keep it a little bit low. I'll go into more detail about what that's doing later. But I like my lines to look like this when I start sketching. So I'll stop rambling. Let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the layer that I already had from the sketch from earlier. And the way you turn off a layer so that you can't see it anymore is to come down to this layers section and click the little eyeball to the left of the layer, and that will turn it off. Alternatively, you can click it again to turn it back on. But we're going to turn it off so we can start fresh. Alright, let's draw this snail. We're going to start with his little round head. Put in a big round snail shell. Gonna move him over a little bit, and the way you move something on your canvas is to click this button up here that looks like your cursor and drag it. Put in some little eye stalks. Now I'm going to put in his cute little eye, and you're probably thinking, Faebelina, that's not where snails' eyes go. I know. But one of the first things you're going to have to learn about art is that you can do whatever you want to do. It does not have to be accurate. We're also going to put his mouth in the wrong place. And you can erase things as you see fit, lines that you don't like. Let's put the little swirly into a shell. If you're wondering how I'm zooming in and out, one of the ways you can do it is to come over here where you see my cursor circling and drag this back and forth. There are shortcuts for pretty much anything you do in Photoshop, but we'll get into that later. Today is all about super beginner stuff. No worries. Alright, so we have our little guy. I'm going to put a couple of leaves behind him. Maybe some little pebbles because he's scooting around on the ground. And I'm just not fond of this part right here. See, this is the wonderful thing about digital art, is that you can do whatever you want to and you're not wasting anything. You're not wasting any money on canvases or on art supplies or paint. I still don't like that. That's okay. We'll just go with this. See, I'm not a very confident sketcher. And you're probably not either if you're watching this. And that's okay. You just have to keep trying until you come up with something that you like. Now he's a little bit wonky on the canvas, and if yours is too, I'll show you a quick way to change the size of something without changing the proportions. We're going to come up to File, or rather Edit, sorry, Free Transform. Now if you use this the way that it is, it kind of goes all over the place when you're trying to resize it. Yeah? So if you want to keep him with the relative same proportions but change his size, you go to Edit, Free Transform, and you click this button up here that kind of looks like a chain link. And see, when you move him, he stays within the same relative proportion. I'm telling you this because I desperately wish someone had told me that a very long time ago. It would have been super helpful. So now he's better on the canvas. I want to show one more thing to you. If you're doing the free transform and you have this clicked and you click any of these buttons that go to the side, or to the top and not the diagonal ones, as you can see there, it doesn't work. It only works when you're using the diagonal ones. So there's just a little lesson that's going to make your life so much easier when you're drawing. So now that we have our sketch, we can start moving on to line art. Now, if you want to get really, really clean line art, you're probably not going to get it through default Photoshop. Default Photoshop doesn't have line stabilization. It's one of the only flaws I can find in this program. And so in order to aid artists like me who have shaky hands and have a hard time with line art, you can check the description box below where I have a link to Lazy Nezumi, which is an add-on you can get for Photoshop and various programs to help you with your line stabilization. So if you want to do the next lining part, I would suggest giving it a shot using the free trial and see what you think. If you want line art like this, that's very clean and crisp, again, you're probably not going to get it from default Photoshop. Alright, so now that we're starting on the line art, we'll need to come down here and turn the opacity down on our sketch layer. This way we can easily tell the difference between our sketches and our line art layer. We're going to create a new layer on top of our sketch layer, and coming to our settings for our brush, turn the transfer off if you had it on, and let's choose a color for our line art. I try to stay away from pure black because it's pretty harsh, so I'm going to use kind of a super dark green. You can pick whatever you want to though. I'm going to create a new layer here since I'm lining his little head, and his head intersects with the stalks, and since I don't want to erase them on the same layer, I'm creating a new layer, and we'll work on erasing later. For now, we're just going to line and leave the lines intersected. We'll put the sparkle in his eye back later. Now, since I'm pretty slow at this, I'm going to speed up this part for you guys. So now that we have our line art finished, we can start to clean it up. So I'm just going to go in and erase all the places where things overlap that I don't want to overlap. Okay, make sure to save. And now I'm going to show you how to merge layers. So right now, our pieces of line art are all in different separate layers. And I'll show you how to merge them all very easily. We're going to come down here to the background and we're going to turn that layer off. We're going to turn our sketch layer off. And then we're going to right click on one of our line art layers and say merge visible. Now when we turn our background layer on, suddenly our line art is all on the same layer. I forgot to fix a little part of his shell. Now we can move on to color. So now that we've learned how to merge all of our line art layers, I'm going to show you a really easy trick of how to fill in your line art with fast color. So you're going to make sure that you have your line art layer selected. And you're going to come up here to the selection tool that looks kind of like a wand, and you're going to select anywhere outside your line art. Then come up to select and choose inverse. This has changed the selection from everything outside the line art to everything inside the line art. So we're going to create a new layer on top of our background, and underneath our line art, choose the bucket tool and the color that you'd like to fill it in with. We'll just go with a green for right now. And select. And when you're done with your selection, you can choose select, deselect. And that's just a really quick way to fill in your line art. We're not going to use that today, but I figured I'd show you for future reference. Now let's get into some coloring. Make sure we go back to our brush tool. I'm going to make mine a little bit larger. And make sure you have a layer underneath your line art layer. So remember, choose your background and then create a new layer. I'm going to make sure that transfer is off because I want this base color to be solid. That's what we're going to be working on now, are the basic colors. I'm going to turn my flow all the way up. Maybe choose kind of a foresty green. If you're worried that you don't know much about color and you don't know what colors to pick, don't worry about it too much, and don't worry about being perfect, because color is something that you learn with time. You can learn color theory, but sometimes people do strange things with color that you'll see that go against color theory, and you wonder, oh, how did they know to do that? How did they know that those colors look good together? Well, a lot of it's just practice and figuring out things on your own. And there. I'm just going to take the eraser tool and clean up some of the edges. If you're wondering what this is over here that I keep clicking, this is a wonderful little tool that I wish I had learned about earlier. This is your history tab. And this way you can easily go back and forth between things that you've done to make changes. Alright, now I'm going to create a new layer for his shell. I'm going to put it on top of this layer. And I'll show you why I'm putting these on separate layers in a bit. We're going to make his shell orange, I think. Now, you should have this shell color on top of the body color. And as you can see here, because it's on top of this layer, when you paint on the shell layer, it's going over the body. If you ever want to move something underneath another layer and change the layer order, all you have to do is take your cursor over the layer that you want to move and then drag it. And now it's behind. Just like that. Alright, now I'm going to put a little bit of color in the leaves behind him, and since the leaves are behind him, I probably want to put my layer underneath everything that I've just done. And here's where I'm going to show you the first key binding that you'll need to be using, and that is Alt. This is how you pick up color. You can come up here and use the color picker, but it'll save you a whole lot of time if you learn to use Alt, like so. And you just hover over the color that you want to pick up and press your pen down on your tablet. Then release Alt and you can start drawing again. That is how you pick up color, and it's so handy. Now, I kind of don't want to spend all my time coming in here and trying to stay in the lines for this background part, so I'm going to use that tool that I showed you earlier, that trick of selecting the outside, inverse, go to the layer that I want to put these leaves on, and look how easy this is. I'm going to make the pebbles maybe tannish brown color. And deselect, and look how easy that was. Now I'm going to show you guys how to use clipping masks. This is the easiest way to help you stay inside the lines of what you're trying to work on, inside the space that you're trying to work on without going outside the edges. And it's very, very helpful. Again, this is one of those things that I wish I knew a long time ago. So let's say we're going to work on the body. We want to stay inside these lines because if I want to color on here and I get outside the lines, it obviously does that. So there's two ways that you can stay inside this body color here. You can choose to lock the layer like this, which means that no matter how far outside I go, it's only painting inside. That's one way of doing it. But if you're not very confident with staying on the same layer and you want to explore different options and be free to make mistakes, you need to use a clipping mask. So what we're going to do is create a new layer on top of the body color, and we're going to right click it and choose Create Clipping Mask. And you see there's an arrow here that's pointing down to our body color. That means that it's clipped onto this layer. Everything that goes on this layer that we're on is going to stay within the parameters of the layer beneath it. Now that we know that, we're going to move on to blending. So I'm going to take my flow down. I'm going to show you on this layer what flow is doing. Let's use a completely different color than what we've got here. Let's go with some pink, maybe some reddish pink. I'm going to turn my transfer back on. So transfer is basically controlling the opacity of your brush. Flow is kind of like the best example that I've seen. This, I wish I could credit who I heard this from, but the best example I've heard is it's kind of like when you're using a marker as a kid. When you make the first stroke, you have that much ink on the paper, and then when you make the second stroke, it's building. So when I turn my flow all the way up, I'll show you the difference. First stroke, the second stroke. Now let's turn the transfer off and see the difference there. First stroke, second stroke. So when you're controlling both your transfer and your flow, you can create really awesome blending effects. I'm going to go with about 50% flow for this, and I'm going to make sure that my transfer is all the way down. And we're going to start laying in some highlights and some shadows. So first thing you need to do when you're going to color your piece is determine where the light source is going to be. And I'm thinking the light is going to be coming from this direction. So the places that are going to be touched by the light are here, here, here. If this curve in his shell kind of sticks out, it'll be there, maybe a little bit on his tail. And then you have to think about the light that's coming back, because light doesn't just come from one direction. Sometimes it comes from all directions because it bounces off of other surfaces. So if the sun's coming this way, it's probably going to bounce onto these areas. And so these are things you have to think about when you're putting in color. So we have our brush ready. Again, we're just using the normal brush. There's so much you can do with just default brushes. And then you can build up your repertoire with other fun things. I'm going to go ahead and make a layer on top of this layer and put his eye shine back in, because the poor guy, he looks kind of dead right now. There we go. Now he's cute again. We're going to come back to this clipping mask layer that we made. And let's start putting in some color. The first thing I'm going to do is add some red, some pretty saturated red to his antenna stalks. I don't even know if that's what they're called, so forgive me. I was thinking of a billion different things I wanted to draw, and I saw a picture of a snail and I was like, we're just gonna go with that because that looks fun. Originally we were gonna do a goldfish in a bubble. Maybe I'll do that with a side tutorial, I don't know. So how did I just blend this? If you take the first color, I'll show you on a different layer. If this is your color, and let's say your green is down here and you want the green and the red to mix together, you're going to take the red and kind of go over the green. And then you're going to use that press that Alt button down and pick a color that's kind of in between. And keep blending and keep blending, and you just do that over and over again. Let me make my brush a little bit bigger. You keep doing that over and over again until suddenly you have a gradient, and it can take a little bit of work. I suggest using kind of a circular motion. And there you go. And some brushes are better than others with blending. With blending, you'll have to figure out what you like and what works best for you. But don't give up if it's not turning out the way you want to at first. Sometimes you might be picking up the wrong color. Your colors might start to get muddy because you're over blending. So just keep playing around with it. You will get it in time. So the sunlight that's going to be hitting him is, in my mind, going to be warm. So we're going to use a warmer green. Here's one thing that will be really helpful when you're coloring. Don't just make, say, his head a lighter green and then the shadows a darker green. Don't stay within the same color family. Colors take all kinds of various... I'm on the wrong layer. Excuse me. Colors are not linear like that. You know, they don't just stay within the same family. Like when you look at a person's face, you might think, I'm on the wrong layer again. Sorry. This happens. Go back to your clipping layer. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. Colors, well, like when you look at a person's face, you might think that their skin color is X color. But then when you look closely, you can tell that they have bluer areas and maybe purpler areas and yellowish areas, all on the same skin in the same light. I'm going to turn my flow down just a little bit, experiment, and see if this looks better. So again, we're trying to put this color where we think the sun is hitting, or a light source, rather. Maybe he's got a little lip for his eye over here, a little lid. And if the sun is hitting these eye stalks, it's going to be brighter up here too. Maybe go a little bit more saturated. Speaking of that, this is how your color selection is going to work. If you're going this direction, you're going from lighter to darker. And if you're going from this direction, you're going from less saturated to more saturated. So the color's stronger over here. The color's a little bit weaker over here. But that doesn't mean that that's worse. Sometimes desaturated colors can look better in used in certain ways than saturated colors. It's really easy when you're first starting out to just use saturated colors and nothing else. Alright, so let's say that we're kind of happy with these highlights and we want to put in some shadows. This is a good rule of thumb, but you don't have to stick to it. Again, art rules are just kind of, as Barbosa would say, they're more like guidelines than actual rules. But a good rule of thumb is that if you've used a warm highlight, you need a cool shadow. And if you use a cool highlight, you need a warm shadow. So we used a warm highlight, so we're going to use a cool shadow. So we're going to select the green, again using that Alt button, and we're going to make our color cooler. Make it a little bluer and a little bit darker and a little more saturated. And we're going to add in our shadow to the places where we think shadow would be. And we're going to blend, 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 blend. Isn't that what they say about makeup all the time? Blend, blend, blend. I don't know. If so, the same is true for art. Although some people like to paint where you can see their brush strokes, and that's fine too. That's a really nice style. Sometimes in my other works you can see my brush strokes. So you look at this little guy and you can tell that he's green, but he's got yellow and he's got blue going on. And these stalks are a mixture of green and red and orange, so don't be afraid to use colors, to have fun with colors. Don't limit yourself to only a few options. Alright, so now we're going to make a little bit of a shadow on his stalk. I'm going to maybe come into a purplish tone because that's cooler than red. And I like that. I like how vibrant that looks. That's pretty. Now we're going to put in some of that bounce light I was talking about earlier. So let's say that the ground is brownish or yellowish, and maybe this color is reflecting back onto the little guy. Maybe we'll pick up some of this orange. Maybe the orange shell is reflecting a little bit. And then up here, we're going to add just a tad bit more yellow. So I'm not quite sure that gradient is popping enough. Alright, so let's do something with the shell. Once you are happy with your clipping mask here, and you're ready for it to be all on one layer, you simply right-click your clipping mask and choose Merge Down. And now everything that you did is on the same layer. It's pretty nifty. So we're going to do the same thing with the shell. We're going to create a clipping mask on top of it. And we're going to start putting in some warmer colors. Remember the direction that your light is coming from at all times. And also, don't be like me here. Please save often. I cannot tell you how many times I've done something awesome and then Photoshop crashes, or you lose power, or anything. Anything could happen. Your cat walks across your keyboard. So, save often. Maybe there's a little bit of light on this curve. I'm showing you this in real time so that you can see how long this takes. Because sometimes we see sped up videos and we think, oh my goodness, they're so great, they're so fast. How do they do that? And some people are. Some people have gotten really fast, but it's okay. It's okay to take your time. So now I'm going to select the original orange that we had, and I'm going to use purple. I'm going to use purple for our kind of desaturated purple for our shadow and see what it looks like. Can always change our minds later. I kind of like that. Okay, so I think that looks alright for now. It's a little bit brush strokey. We could blend some more, but we're just going to move on. Now I feel like there's not enough light here. So So we're going to go even brighter. Make our brush pretty big again. So I'm going to make a big swath of color here. Give it a little bit more contrast. Maybe give the shell a little bit of a shine. See, we're starting to use shadow and light to create a shape. And that's what we want. I'm going to make it just a little bit brighter up here. Maybe this stalk is casting a shadow. Alright, now let's do that bounce light again. Maybe it's a little bit greenish, since it's coming off the leaves in his body. And make some shinier highlights. Maybe we can make him even really shiny if you wanted to. That's kind of cute. Let's stick with it. Alrighty, so we've done a little bit of shadow, we've done a little bit of color. I think I might actually make the shadow a little bit darker, a little bit cooler. Sometimes just a little bit of color can change things so dramatically. There, that's pretty. I like that better. And there we go. Now I'm going to merge this clipping mask that we made down onto the layer below it. So merge down. And let's say we want to put the whole snail on one layer. We'll merge that down. And suddenly, all of our color that we just did is on one layer. And I'll show you why that's helpful in a little bit. Now we're going to do something with these leaves. I'm going to create a clipping mask again, but you can also lock the layer and paint on the same layer if you feel confident. And again, I'm just using that Alt key very, very liberally. We're just going to add a little bit of shadow. I'm not going to detail these leaves too much. Maybe his little antenna is casting a shadow on here. A shell, maybe? And then I'm going to select the original color and put a warmer color on the other side. And maybe we'll make the shadows over here even darker. Again, we used a warm highlight, so we're going cooler with the shadow. But that's a rule you can break. But it does help if you're really unsure of what to do with your colors. Maybe let's make an even greater highlight. And maybe we'll use kind of an earthy tone for a bounce light. Not everything has to have a bounce light all the time. You won't have a bounce light in everything that you do. I'm just kind of having fun with it here. I'm going to come down to these pebbles and give them some shadow, some highlights, just a little bit. Maybe show that these are round a bit more. Select the original color, use a lighter color. I'm going to create a layer above my background. Maybe put some blue. And then blend it out. Just a little something. Maybe some tan at the bottom. I'm gonna move the slider a little bit closer to green and come down here because shadows aren't really black. They pick up the color a little bit of whatever it is they're close to. And I'm just kind of playing with colors here. It's okay to just experiment. Alright, before we call this finished, I'm going to show you one last thing. We've done all of this with one brush, but I would like to show you something I like to do at the end of my pieces to kind of give them a more finished look. I'm going to merge this, this clipping mask leaf layer down. We're going to go back to this snail layer, create a new layer, create a clipping mask, which we know how to do by now. And here we're going to change the layer mode. Now this is just bonus, okay? Because I know we said we were only going to use one of the brushes, but if you like to, this is kind of a bonus round. And we're going to turn it to overlay. I'm going to select the default round brush that is an airbrush. Make it a little bit larger. Make sure I've got my shape dynamics on, pin pressure on, transfer on, pin pressure on. And I'm going to choose a general warm color. And I'm going to put some extra light in here. I'm actually going to make this a bit bigger. And I'm just going to lightly brush over the areas where the light is falling. And then I'm going to pick up maybe this purple shadowy color. And emphasize the darker places. I'm going to turn this off and on and you can kind of see what it's doing here. See, I'd added a little bit more contrast. If you like it, you can merge it down. And I almost forgot the rest of his eye. I'm going to create a new layer. Go back to our original brush. I'm going to turn the shape dynamics on and the transfer off, because we're just going to make this solid white. Now, eyes aren't actually solid white, but for right now, we're just going to do this. For this little guy anyway. And there you have it. That's your finished piece. If you drew this along with me, please tweet me at Faebelina on Twitter. I would love to see what you did, and if you decided to draw something else and just use these principles, I would love to see that too. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and keep arting.